morning and welcome to Rising. Of course, we've got a great show for you today. I am happy to be back from vacation in the chair next to my dear friend Niall. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too, Robby. Glad you had a great vacation and welcome back.
Thank you. I did. I ate a lot of terrific Sicilian food, swam in the sea, and I actually got engaged.
Well, congratulations on that. That is big personal news. So delighted for you. Delighted for you both in that respect.
Thank you so much.
Well, I guess back to business. What is on your radar today, Robby?
Yes, indeed. Let's get right to it. And apologies if I'm late to this story due to said vacation, but I couldn't resist weighing in. Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic Socialist and the Democratic Party's newly minted candidate to be the mayor of New York City, well, he found himself in some hot water last week after the New York Times reported that he claimed to be both Asian and black or African American on his college application to Columbia University. Now, many black New Yorkers were not very happy about that, including incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, who is actually black and is running for re-election as an independent. Adams said in a statement, "The African American identity is not a checkbox of convenience. It's a history, a struggle, and a lived experience. For someone to exploit that for personal gain is deeply offensive." The conservative New York Post had a field day with the news and interviewed numerous black New Yorkers who described Mamdani as a fraud and a liar. Now, this matters because Mamdani is an exciting candidate for many progressives and far-left voters, whites, the affluent. For black voters in the working class, Mamdani is perhaps not quite so alluring. Now, while he easily won the Democratic mayoral primary 2 weeks ago, rival Andrew Cuomo, the scandal-plagued former governor of the state, actually performed significantly better with African Americans. As far as Mamdani's identity goes, he is of Indian descent. He's an African. He was born in Uganda. He's an African and an American, but the term African American usually understood to mean black, and he is definitely not black. However, when applying to Columbia University in 2009, Mamdani checked the boxes for Indian and black or African American when asked to give information about his race and ethnicity. Mamdani openly admits to doing so. He told the Times he thought it was the best way, though admittedly an imperfect one, to explain his background. Indian, born in Uganda. "Even though these boxes are constraining, I wanted my college application to reflect who I was," said Mamdani, noting that he wrote in Ugandan when asked to provide additional info. Now, this matters, of course, because at the time he applied to Columbia, the university practiced race-conscious admissions, which in my view is a politically correct way of saying that they actively discriminated against certain applicants on the basis of race and in favor of others, Hispanic people, black people, Native Americans, and so on. Checking the black or African American box would have earned Mamdani extra points toward admission, though as a notable aside, Mamdani's application was ultimately rejected. Conservatives are widely sharing this story on social media, claiming that it speaks to Mamdani's character, that he was deceptive about his ethnicity in order to gain an advantage. Meanwhile, many Democrats think this is a total nothing burger. Former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, a progressive Democrat, wrote on social media that Uganda is in Africa, so case closed. Where's the confusion? To any Democrats who are tempted to align themselves with de Blasio's thinking, I would ask them to engage in this thought experiment with me. Let's say that when awarding federal contracts, the government gave special consideration on the basis of race, and a non-black man from South Africa, when applying for the contract, had checked a box claiming to be black or African American. We can even give our made-up aspiring federal contractor a name. How about Elon Musk? I suspect Democrats would not say this was a non-story in such a case, even though South Africa is indeed a country in Africa, has Africa in the name. Now, all that said, I have a take that may surprise some of you, may even surprise Niall here. I actually don't particularly blame Mamdani for doing this at all. That's because ethnicity is extremely complicated. Race, on the other hand, is essentially an imaginary concept that's obsessed over by exactly two kinds of people, old school racists and then the progressive elites who run college admissions departments. If you want to be mad at someone, be mad at them. Be mad at the elite left-wing institutions that incentivize people to get creative when describing the color of their skin because they assign false value to it. This is a practice, by the way, that voters reject every time they are asked to weigh in on it, and one the Supreme Court has essentially banned as of 2023. I think there are many good reasons not to vote for Zohran Mamdani, Niall. I don't think this is really one of them. I am not fazed at all that he did this, and it is incumbent on every person applying to colleges under such a ridiculous racial paradigm to be as creative as possible. So I don't care, but for different reasons than I think the people defending him.
So I think there are many good reasons to vote for Zoran Mamdani for a start. But you also noted toward the end of your radar there about, who one should get mad at. And I actually think who one should get mad at here is the New York Times for a story that I consider pretty ridiculous. Yes, because here is the central point here. Mamdani did nothing wrong. And this was presented as a scoop on the part of the Times. What we have here is a man of Asian parentage, born in Africa, who says on his form that he is of Asian and African heritage. There isn't any lie here at all. And furthermore, on the form, there was apparently a secondary point where you could supply additional information, and he noted that he was Ugandan by birth. And there are all sorts of complicated historical reasons why Uganda and India have historically quite close links. Apparently his father's family, though of Indian heritage, has lived in Uganda for about 100 years. So there is no there in terms of the Times story. Furthermore, it was a story that appears to have been prompted, at least, by something discovered by this guy Jordan Lasker, who's better known, and I may be mispronouncing this, Kremua, I believe, is the Twitter account and the Substack. Somebody who has, well, the Times put it as, writes often about IQ and race. Wired says that he promotes eugenics. It's obviously somebody who is very, very opposed to Zoran Mamdani's views and has, I'll be diplomatic and say, controversial views about race and IQ. So the Times has sort of souffled up this non-story at the behest of somebody who holds very right-wing views, and I think is getting deserved blowback for it.
I don't know anything about this individual. I've never read their Substack. I'd never heard of them until this story. The underlying information is not being contested.
Right, including by Mamdani.
Right, he acknowledges it. I don't agree that it's not a story. I think the way they covered it was perfectly fair. The box says Black or African American. Mm-hmm. To virtually all of us, that doesn't mean born in Africa or from Africa. That means, in an American context, African American means Black.
Yes, but hold on. Mamdani points out that the options available on that form were inadequate.
Absolutely, and I agree that they were inadequate. Right. In fact, I think this entire project of trying to explain, I mean, even like, I guess I'm supposed to check the box, you and I would both check the box, white Caucasian, even though my family is from Italy and Germany, and your family is from Ireland, and the idea of reducing those vast cultural differences and backgrounds to the same box is patently ridiculous to me, as would be reducing Uganda and South Africa and Somalia and Egypt to all being Africa. That's also ridiculous to me. The entire project that Columbia is engaged in here is ridiculous to me, which is why I don't blame him at all. But I guess I would disagree. I think it was fine to cover it, to say that I think it's kind of interesting. Frankly, I don't see it as a negative on him. I think it's interesting how someone in this situation would try to encapsulate their race, frankly, that anyone would have to, because this is so ridiculous. So I don't care that the New York Times did it.
To me, it's just like my lack of interest is the story is basically man tells truth on college application form. I don't see why that would be a big issue, not least when, in this case, it comes against the backdrop of just blatant bigotry that has been directed at Mamdani from other quarters. So I'm not a big fan.
All right, a spirited debate on that subject. Next up on Rising, Elon Musk has created his own new political party. Steve Bannon and President Trump, some harsh words for the tech titan. Stay with us. Good morning and welcome to Rising. Of course, we have just a great show for you today on this Tuesday morning. Hello, Niall. I was reflecting, actually, that a milestone was passed by unacknowledged. My first time hosting Rising was 4 years ago in late June. So I've now been at this job, at this desk for 4 straight years.
I'm sorry we didn't mark your anniversary.
Yeah, where was my cake and hat?
Anniversary rising cake, perhaps with the logo emblazoned upon it.
Do you remember the old the smiley face
Yes,
we used to have reflected in the desk? Risey, I called him.
That was a shame that to lose him. Maybe we'll get that in sometime in the near future. You never know. In the meantime, what is on your radar, Robby?
Let's get to it. The moderate liberal faction of the Democratic Party just keeps getting bad news. Democratic leadership, in the persons of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, is temperamentally moderate, culturally progressive, and lukewarm at best on economic populism, which means they aren't exactly loved by the left. It turns out, however, that unique combination of beliefs is fairly unpopular not just with the left, but with the entire Democratic Party's base. Now, don't take my word for it. Even as mainstream, a liberal MSNBC host, Joe Scarborough, has noticed that socialist-friendly left progressives are destroying the more moderate voices in the party. People like Senator Bernie Sanders, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and of course Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist sensation, who easily defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo to become the Democratic Party's New York City mayoral candidate. Here was Scarborough stating the problem for moderates quite plainly on Morning Joe.
The 3 most compelling figures, the mayoral candidate, Bernie Sanders, and AOC, the 3 most compelling figures since the election have been far left of, let's say, the mainstream of a lot of Americans. Why can't moderate Democrats, why can't conservative moderate Democrats like you make that same compelling message?
It's a very good question. Now, I have an answer. Morning Joe probably won't like it. Look, increasingly, there's just less and less room in the Democratic Party for moderate voters. Now, part of the problem, undoubtedly, is that the Democratic Party's elite leadership has failed catastrophically, time and time again, to deliver what its voters want. Now, say what you will about the Republican Party, but GOP leaders finally realize that the base loves Trump, there's no way around it, and wants elected members of the party to fall in line with him. Now, GOP leaders rarely try to thwart Trump directly. If they do work against him, it's cowardly, in secret. They know they cannot openly oppose Trump. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, is extremely reluctant to embrace its most popular standard bearers. We can go all the way back to 2016, of course, when the party pulled out all the stops to coronate Hillary Clinton as the candidate, even when rival Bernie Sanders proved unexpectedly popular. You know how that turned out. This time around, Democratic leadership steadfastly maintained no one should challenge Biden, debate Biden, or provide an opportunity to primary voters to select someone other than Biden. After Biden's infirmities were exposed, the party picked Kamala Harris, and she lost. You see the problem? Democratic elites just don't understand their voters. Now, it's true that not everyone who is part of the Democratic base wants economic populism or socialism, but the share that wants neoliberalism paired with cultural progressivism, well, I think that's shrinking every day. If you want to beat a Sanders or a Mamdani, you have to do better than a Clinton or a Cuomo. And as far as the New York mayoral primary goes, this should have been obvious. Cuomo's failures, frankly, they're even more apparent than Hillary Clinton's or Kamala Harris's. In recent memory, Cuomo resigned his office after a sexual misconduct scandal and a COVID deaths-related corruption scandal. And that's who Democratic elites wanted? They're probably right now to be concerned about the general electability of candidates like AOC and Mamdani, who have previously espoused views on crime, foreign policy, gender, all sorts of other issues that do place them, in my view, on the extreme left fringes, despite their relatively more appealing personalities and policy platforms perhaps on other issues. But look, politics is about a lot more than policy. I wish it was just about policy, but it's about so much more. The Democratic Party's so-called moderates are failing a very basic likability test, and the ultimate beneficiary of their short-sightedness will be the eventual 2028 GOP nominee, who's presumably Vice President J.D. Vance. So I saw this clip, Ken Klippenstein shared it on Twitter, of Morning Joe, putting the question to a moderate Democrat, why do you people, our people, because I think Morning Joe has more affection for them, keep losing in head-to-head matches with these people who have far-left policy platforms? And I think it's a fair question. I think part of it is just the likability, is the personality, and then maybe it speaks to Other issues as well, including just the failure of leadership to find appealing moderate candidates or to have even the trust of Democratic voters. I don't know. What do you think Democratic voters want?
Well, I mean, I think Democratic voters want pretty bold proposals and bold rhetoric to go with it. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the show as well. One of the key points here, I think, is people on the left actually believe in what they're saying. And therefore, I think they often make more compelling messengers than people on the centre left or of the sort of Morning Joe type. Now, of course, people can argue about whether the ideas are right or not, but the conviction, I think, does give them a greater impetus in the way they put that. The other point I would make about the sort of Morning Joe style of moderation is it often gets into that kind of rich guy's liberalism, which is essentially socially liberal and economically conservative, and there isn't.
Those are my views, right here.
Yeah, exactly. And the Libertarian Party does fantastically in general elections, as you know. I mean, the point is that there is a much bigger market, I think, for the kind of economic populism that some people on the left are putting forward, and we see it in opinion polls. You know, should the minimum wage be increased federally to $15 an hour? 65% support in a 2023 poll. Is it the government's responsibility to make sure all Americans have health care? 62% from Gallup last year. Should taxes be raised on big businesses and corporations? 63% yes in a Pew Research poll this year. So there is, I think, a market for that. And the kind of Michael Bloombergian kind of version is not, in fact, particularly widely desired, certainly in the Democratic Party.
That's the key point. I think it is not widely desired in the Democratic Party, or at least the fired up Democratic base who's going to show up in primaries. That's the problem. Those kinds of people, warmed over neoliberalism is just not appealing at all. On the overall point that, I always get shown that map of the four quadrants, and there's like no voters in the quadrant that would roughly be my politics, the socially liberal, although I don't really like to describe myself that way, but socially tolerant, government not involved in social life and government not involved in economically life, and that there's not very many voters. That I will push back. That I finally did a little bit of research on how that result was manufactured. To get at that, the questions that lead you away from that quadrant are I think, very, very misleading. They require you to have given responses to end up in that quadrant that I would, for instance, have never indicated. It would there are things about I forget exactly what they were. Something about
the social side or the economic side.
And it's a confusion of both. Like you had to say, like, do you think? You had to commit to some very fairly redistributionist policies to even end up in there. It's like I think it was a very poor person's understanding of what a libertarian ideology is, and that is why you didn't have many voters testing into it.
Well, if only they understood libertarianism, they'd be flocking to your banner.
Maybe I'll do a radar on that topic a little bit later, so we can more fully delve into it.
Sure, absolutely.
Up next, Owen Jones stuns Piers Morgan when discussing October 7th, and President Trump just got a formal Nobel Peace Prize nomination from Benjamin Netanyahu. Niall will have a lot to say about that. Stay tuned. Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have an awesome show for you today, and if you're confused by what you're watching, please don't be. We are proceeding boldly into an exciting new future in our new studio location. I think it's great. I love the color behind us.
We like it. We're fans of this. Our new accommodations.
Yes.
Robby.
Now viewers have to bear with us. We're still deciding, how far forward we sit.
Exactly. How close to each other we should be if we get animated or angry.
I want a bowl for this table. I want some various things.
The big beautiful bowl we've decided to call it.
And people can see our legs now, which I don't know, maybe that's the main draw.
Rating spike, I would say, for sure.
But people who've been watching as long as I've been hosting Rising know that though the look has changed with some frequency, it's still the same Rising content you expect and need and love, which we will be getting to right now.
It is a perfect segue, Robby. So let's get started. What is on your radar?
Well, was Jeffrey Epstein an intelligence asset, and is that the reason the federal officials have consistently declined to reveal more information about who was involved in his underage sex trafficking ring? This question has been on the minds of everyone who closely followed the Epstein saga for years, and now President Donald Trump himself was finally asked about it. And the president did not appreciate the question. In fact, he seems annoyed that media reporters are still asking about Epstein. Here was his response to a direct question about whether Epstein was an intelligence asset.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration. But
Trump then gave the floor to Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said she would look into it and get back to the media on the intelligence asset question. Yeah, right. Now look, the reason the Trump administration is suddenly back-footed on the Epstein issue is because multiple government officials have been exposed as either liars or grifters. Now let me explain. Multiple top officials, including Bondi, but also FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, came to prominence in part because they promised that they would reveal everything the government knew about Epstein if support from MAGA propelled them into positions of power. Now, the MAGA base elevated them and trusted them to deliver on this key promise: release the Epstein client list. Make public what the government knows about powerful men who solicited sex with underage girls while hanging around with this creep Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Expose any in law enforcement or government who protected them or misled the public on their behalf. It's that simple. That was the promise. Now, for many conservatives, libertarians, even many on the left, frankly, this was serious stuff. A sexual predator with vast social ties to government and big business got away with his appalling crimes for years, engineered a sweetheart prison deal once apprehended, and then went right back to his misdeeds afterward. He palled around with Bill Gates and Prince Andrew. He was a major financial force in the U.S. Virgin Islands and a political force. He had a relationship with Bank of America. He hobnobbed with politicians in both parties, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, going way, way back. And of course, he eventually died in prison under suspicious circumstances. Now, I, for one, think it's perfectly plausible that he did kill himself. I've said that a lot on the show. But you can't help but wonder, I don't blame anyone for wondering, whether any powerful people had an interest in silencing him. Importantly, the Bonginos and Patels of the world vowed to clear all this up. But now their answer is there's nothing to see here. All the information's already public. I mean, maybe, but that's pretty unsatisfying. They certainly acted like there was more to come. Bondi, in fact, engineered a now ridiculous-seeming photo op in which he gave binders supposedly containing Epstein info to MAGA influencers like DC Drano and Libs of TikTok. Now, the binders were labeled Phase 1, as if this was just the first in a series of incredible revelations. What was in those binders? Information we already knew? Sigh. Well, so that all seems like grifting, frankly. Like Bondi and company misled not just the public, but their own boosters, their own fans in particular. These people are understandably upset. Liz Wheeler, a conservative influencer who did receive the Epstein binder, she wrote on X that Bondi should lose her job. Now, the other possibility is that this isn't a grift. There actually is additional damning information about Epstein's associates in the government's possession. But the reason they aren't telling you more about it is this. The intelligence community relied on Epstein for years, this is the theory, was well aware of his sexual proclivities, but turned a blind eye to that so that he could continue providing intelligence or even blackmail materials to the U.S. government or to a foreign power. Does that sound like a conspiracy theory? Maybe it is, but the alternative explanation is that several of the most prominent leaders of the MAGA movement treated their own supporters, you guys, like chumps. And I don't like it, Niall. I don't like it.
No, I mean, I think that we are broadly in agreement on this, actually. This isn't one of the issues where we've big ideological differences. Jeffrey Epstein was at the nexus of a whole lot of influential, powerful people while being a predator on a huge scale. Obviously, that raises questions. You rightly in your radar suggested that are these people like Bondi and Kash Patel and all that liars or grifters? And I think that's really the key question. Because either they were knowingly saying stuff that was untrue to sort of gin up the base, right, and to aggravate people, or it was just like nonsense. And so that is a real problem, I think, for them. One of the points I would make, in addition to the ones you made, is it's not only what they said about unveiling this, it's the fact that there are people now close to President Trump who suggested that keeping this off limits was nefarious, including Donald Trump Jr. in 2023 tweeting, "Show us all the Epstein list. Why would anyone protect those scumbags? Ask yourself this question daily and the answer becomes very apparent." Well, is the answer still very apparent? Has the answer changed?
Right, because now they're the ones protecting this list if it does exist. And maybe it just doesn't exist.
Right.
Maybe, but they should have said that much more clearly from the start, because Pam Bondi, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, in response to media questions about this from conservatives, from Fox, gave the impression that it did exist and that we'd be getting more disclosures about people who were involved. Maybe that she just wasn't paying close enough attention, or it was not acknowledging that information had already been released.
Yeah, I mean, because
if it's just a big nothing burger, that's so unsatisfying given what their position with respect to this has been.
And the issue about that Fox interview is it wasn't just that it exists in some abstract or nebulous fashion. It was apparently on her desk and has now seemingly disappeared from her desk into the ether where there isn't any information.
The intelligence asset idea, by the way, my understanding is that is an idea introduced itself by Alex Acosta, a former Trump administration official from the first season of the Trump presidency, who was also the relevant legal authority in Florida for the first prosecution of Epstein. And I believe, now it's not a solid source, I believe it's an unnamed source to the Daily Beast or something, said that he had said that. So it could be mistaken.
Right.
But frankly, it is not beyond, it doesn't beggar the belief system or challenge my imagination that much that now they get in charge and they go, okay, let's release it all, and they find out, oh, wait a minute. Sure. He knew things and he was gathering information or doing state-sponsored blackmail, and we can't bring any of that to light, which is horrifying, but I can believe it.
Oh, I mean, the whole thing is just so massively sketchy that there are absolutely valid questions and they haven't been answered at all. Meanwhile, up next, leaked audio of President Trump saying he's going to bomb the blank out of Moscow if Putin attacked Ukraine.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is day 2 in our new digs, and the first with Lindsay Granger in the new studio. Hello.
I'm back. I missed you so much.
I missed you as
well.
well.
I was going crazy. I couldn't even sleep. I was like, where's my friend?
You've been all over the place.
I did. I went to Turkey, better known as Turkey, because Erdogan has asked people to call it that.
Oh.
And you just got back from Italy, right?
I know. We were both abroad. How about that?
Enjoying. And then I was getting I was saying all the New York Times and all the news alerts. I'm like, wow, you missed 1 week of news and you feel like you missed a year.
Yeah, you were gone for the entire U.S.-Iran war.
So there was a lot, but I'm sure I missed a couple of radars about that. So tell me what's on your radar today.
Well, today we are tackling a different subject. Ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino is stepping down after 2 years at the helm of Elon Musk's social media site, which he purchased in October 2022. Now, Musk hired Yaccarino in June of 2023 to run Twitter and rebranded it as X the following month. Yaccarino wrote on X, "When Elon Musk and I first spoke of his vision for X, I knew it would be the opportunity of a lifetime to carry out the extraordinary mission of this company. I'm immensely grateful to him for entrusting me with the responsibility of protecting free speech, turning the company around, and transforming X into the Everything app." Elon responded, thanking her for her contributions. Yaccarino also received affirmation from many conservative, libertarian, and independent commentators, including Megyn Kelly, Michael Schellenberger, and Charlie Kirk, who credit her with guiding X through a tumultuous time, attracting advertisers back to the site while living up to Musk's free speech commitments. Not all reactions were positive, however. Musk's archenemy, Steve Bannon, weighed in on his own show, vowing to pursue her legally wherever she goes. Bannon said, "You can run, baby, but you can't hide." Watch this.
Hey, Linda, you can run, baby, but you can't hide. You're not going to hide from the lawsuits, girl. We know why you're stepping down and why you're running. Okay, we understand why you're stepping down and why you're running. That Elmo's out of control. Sorry, baby, that came with the job. You took the job, you took the pay, you took the warrants, you took the stock options, you took all, the hundreds of millions of dollars you're going to make. No. If you can't keep Elmo in the nursery and keep him under control, you're going to pay a price.
The Elmo Bannon refers to there is, of course, Elon Musk. Bannon and Musk are at war because they represent two different contingents of the MAGA base. Bannon's faction is the stridently anti-immigrant, economic populist side, and Musk represents the more libertarian, market-inclined, pro-free speech side. They've been jockeying for influence over President Donald Trump since the beginning of Trump's second term, with each side scoring some victories and losing on other issues. Musk is currently at odds with Trump entirely and plans to launch his own political party, the America Party. Meanwhile, Bannon's faction is demoralized over Trump's recent foreign policy decisions with respect to Iran, and also the Epstein files fizzle. It should be noted that the Elon faction isn't happy about either of those things either. It's actually a third, tiny little faction, the neoconservatives, who seem most pleased, unfortunately, with how things are going, but I digress. Now, recently, Musk actually accused Steve Bannon of being in the Epstein files. That's why Bannon's going so hard against him now, threatening lawsuits, calling on Trump to deport him. Bannon said Musk is not an American, he's a South African, and in response, Musk called Bannon a fat, drunken slob who has a lifetime of crime to pay for. You're not entertained? Well, let's set aside Musk versus Bannon for just a moment. When it comes to Yaccarino, I agree with Megyn Kelly, Michael Schellenberger, and company. Everybody in the MAGA movement owes Yaccarino a round of applause, not thinly veiled threats and insults. She accomplished a great deal. It was not easy to win advertisers back to the platform while still changing the site's moderation policies to comport with Musk's vision of unfettered free speech. As former State Department official and tech policy expert Mike Benz wrote on X, Linda stood up and fought for free speech during arguably its most acute crisis moment in world history, when we're almost on the brink of losing it. She stepped up for all of us in the face of what seemed like insurmountable pressure from governments, advertisers, boycotters, banking institutions, and astroturfed lynch mobs. Thank Linda for her service and excited for her next chapter. I'm with Mike, and I'm sad to see X's CEO become the ex-CEO. For the work of protecting social media, the new town square from censorship continues. And also from just bad business decisions. I don't know if you've seen that Grok has gone a bit haywire in the last 48 hours. And while I appreciate it, I guess, being politically incorrect, I think they tweaked it a little bit too far in that direction, and that needs correction. But I'm grateful for what Yaccarino has done. I think it's not easy to balance all these different factions, to manage Elon Musk personally. As much affection as I do have for him, I think he is, I don't mean this as a dig, I think he can be difficult to work with and for, so I think she did a great job.
I mean, she definitely was trying to maintain and manage corporate responsibility and credibility. She said that she would allow people to have this freedom of speech, but I think that X, which was Twitter when she first got there, became a place of like constant hate and negativity. And there's so much on there where the platform has allowed you to say anything, but advertisers have pulled out of the platform under her reign. And yes, she said she brought some of them back, but not nearly close to the spending levels they were prior to some of their content being laid next to, let's say, Nazi speech or something that was, wildly inappropriate for an advertiser. And because she created this haven of like everyone say and do whatever you want, I think it created a kind of an uncomfortable situation where she's running a platform where a lot of times you'll see an overwhelming amount of negativity or hate speech or something. You want to kind of just have at least a decent filter, especially someone coming from a place like NBC Universal, where she pulled in advertisers for a major network. No matter what you feel about their content, they definitely have a lot of advertisers, right? And she's worked with them. So to bring those relationships over and have Elon Musk be so erratic in the way that he was, and try to balance it. I'm not sure that it did a great job, because do I like X better than I liked Twitter a couple of years ago? Not really. Do you? Maybe. I think you might like it a little bit more. You said it's become more of a welcoming place specifically for conservative.
Yes, certainly. I prefer the moderation now. I don't know that I like it better, though, because people, it used to be easier to interact. You used to do more interaction and have more arguments with people you disagree with. And I feel like a lot of the people I disagree with left the platform to go to Blue Sky. And now, instead of having everyone in the same place arguing, we're now a little bit more siloed, which I don't think is a good thing. I do prefer the moderation now. The claims about it being so hateful, I think certainly I see more hateful content, I think, than I used to, or at least from conservatives. I see less hateful content from liberals or the left, just because there are fewer of them on the platform. Some of the claims that drove advertisers away, however, were false or misleading, made by activist groups trying to pressure advertisers to leave, that were like, oh yes, look at how your advertisements are next to hate. And then when you looked closer at that, that was manufactured and was very unlikely to occur naturally in the wild. So I think some of the reasons the advertisers left were for activist-driven, not actually business decisions. That said, there is clearly more hate on the site. Look what Grok itself is doing. But that's not Grok is a feature that they have that needs correction, and then it will not. It's not freely choosing of its own. I said this yesterday. It is not alive. It has no views or desires of its own. It has been programmed to do this or this, and it has been tampered with in a way that is not good, that needs to be fixed.
And I think it's a little bit alarming to me to think about what the next iteration of X is, because there's so many people on there, and now we know it's becoming this social experiment for Elon Musk that now XAI is heavily involved in, and that means this is a lot more AI. And like you said, the Grok issue. So what does that mean when the leadership is not an actual person that's going through like a moral, credible corporate social responsibility filter versus an AI machine that, like you said, maybe has been programmed in the wrong way by somebody who...
Well, it's programmed by people who are making moral or business-related decisions, who have some motivations. It is not choosing... That's my point. It does not have its own... It is not self-aware. It's not Cybernet or
I guess
the Matrix
Elon Musk
robots
with that much
or the
credibility.
Battlestar Galactica robots, or we can go down and down through the line of science fiction.
That's the part that scares me, that Elon
intelligence.
Musk is the head of who's programming that and telling them what to do, and we've seen his erratic behavior and knowing how people actually get news information from there. It's disturbing, but there's also so many outlets to get news from, like our show, so
That's right.
Next up on Rising, Russia has launched its largest drone attack on Ukraine, and President Trump is not happy about it. Stay with us.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. I'm Amber Duke, joined by Lindsay Granger, our first time hosting together.
We were like, how did we miss each other for like months? But I'm so excited because I've been watching a lot of your stuff, so I feel like we're going to have a great conversation.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it as well. First news of the day, 6 Secret Service agents are suspended without pay over failures related to last year's assassination attempt against President Trump. The agents will be off the job ranging from 10 to 42 days, according to Secret Service Deputy Director Matt Quinn. They will be allowed to return to the job once the period is over, but with diminished operational responsibility.
A source tells News Nation 2 of them are appealing the suspension. The leave has not begun, but is expected to start shortly. The Secret Service has faced heavy criticism for the agency's response to the attack. The gunshots in the attempt grazed Trump's ear, if you remember, and killed firefighter Corey Comparatori.
Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna sounded off on the news, saying, given the shocking security failures that day, this is the absolute bare minimum. She adds, suspending 6 Secret Service agents for 10 to 42 days without pay is nothing more than a glorified vacation. Our president was nearly assassinated.
I actually agree. I think it was a core failure. When you look at just the accountability, not just the apologies. I know that the FBI director resigned last summer, because she said this was like a gross miscalculation on their part. And so usually the head of the company takes the fall for something like this. But when you think about the other people involved with like missing meetings, I read that they only had 2 official meetings before this huge event. Knowing what the stakes were and how high the tensions were, I was calling last year to bring the temperature down. There was so much around the moment of the presidency and the election that it's like not a lackadaisical job. And it's not like 30 days off, 60 days off is going to change what happened. I think people still want to know what happened, but I don't know that people, or at least the president, shouldn't want to think that these people who have acted in that manner and went through the rigorous training it takes to be in that job have just kind of like put their hands up and are back to work in a couple months.
That's right, and it actually took the second assassination attempt at Trump's club down in Florida for the Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle to resign, and she ended up being replaced by the deputy director who was on the job when these 2 incidents occurred, so probably little comfort to people who are worried about Secret Service leadership. And realistically, the people who were involved in the security failures should be fired. I mean, the fact that they're able to remain on the job and have such a short suspension, and the fact that it hasn't been served yet, right? Like, why didn't this happen immediately after this massive failure? There were so many things that went wrong that day, from not flying their own drone over the area to failing to secure that water tower overlooking the roof that the shooter was on, to having agents forgetting their key cards as they were leaving some of the buildings where snipers were located, not getting up on the roof because it was too sloped, even though they were on a similarly sloped roof elsewhere on the property. There were just so many things that went wrong, and I actually think if you had just plugged one of those holes, this wouldn't have happened.
Right, and I think there was also a huge misstep with local law enforcement, because you saw that there was hardly any communication, that they're trying to retroactively find better ways to communicate. But when I looked at the history of assassination attempts, I mean, it's happened to almost anyone that's been in a high profile position running for president and actually made it there or very close to there, like most recently before Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Biden. But they didn't come anywhere near affecting them. The fact that we saw blood on the next president's ear and saw him, you know, in that state was like, that was way too close for anyone's comfort. And this is one of those mistakes where, you know, in our industry, if you put a wrong spelling or something, you know, that's a error that needs to be corrected. But I think it's different than if a bullet grazes the next president's ear. And so I don't think that's something where you can just like slap someone on the wrist and say, do better. It's like, you expect these people to protect you at the highest level. I mean, doesn't get any, the sole job of the Secret Service is to protect people in office, particularly the president and former presidents. And so to me, I don't understand this. I don't understand how Trump, who's very vocal and adamant and visible in many facets, wouldn't take this the steps to make sure that he makes sure who's in the Secret Service are the people protecting him, how he doesn't feel more attached to this issue. Feels like he's very quiet.
It's weird, right? I felt the same way about Trump's response. The Daily Caller's White House correspondent on a trip to Iowa last weekend asked the president if he was satisfied with the investigation into the assassination attempt, and he said that he was. But meanwhile, the public doesn't know much of anything about the attempted assassin. They don't know what his motivations were, what his background was, how he got to this point. We haven't heard much about what the Secret Service is doing to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. So to hear Trump himself say it's basically case closed as far as I'm concerned is really bizarre.
And I think people, a lot of people in the MAGA base probably voted for Trump because they thought, okay, he's different from the establishment, bureaucracy, the status quo that doesn't give full answers. And so on something that's this close to home for him, I think people are really looking for real solid and thorough explanations, pointed fingers. And so whether that's the right solution forward to protect him in the future, it should just be hiring the best of the best. But people want answers. I think that's part of what he promised his base. And so it's, like you said, mind-boggling to me that people who are supporting him just want more answers, and he's kind of like, leave it alone. It's almost like, and I don't want to compare it to it, but it's almost like the Epstein case where they're looking for more information and he's like, leave it alone. And people are like, what do you mean? This is why we bonded, because we're going to get every answer that other presidents wouldn't give to us.
Yeah, it is like that, and I know we're going to talk about that later in the show, but you repeatedly hear from the White House that this is the most transparent administration in American history. Caroline Leavitt has said that from the briefing room podium. You've had Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, say it. You recently had EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin say it. You've had Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy say it. And so you can say it a lot of times, but ultimately those words need to be backed up by actions. And I think on some things they have been transparent. We've seen HHS release a lot of new data recently, particularly relating to gender-affirming care for children. We've seen the Transportation Secretary releasing information on long-haul trucking, and like that's all great, but the juicy stuff is the assassination attempts and the Epstein files. And if you fail to hold your promises on that, the base is going to get riled up.
And I also have a theory that it's similar, reminding me of how President Trump handled Pete Hegseth, how he handled the Signal chat, how he handled creating a possible friction with somebody that was a loyalist. And so perhaps, I know when you pick your Secret Service, it's a very personal experience to make sure that everyone around you knows almost everything about you and is protecting you in those ways. And so maybe it's just something where he felt that he picked the most trustworthy people, and bringing in a whole new cohort has to go through several vetting processes, and also creates access for an entire new, let's say 5 or 6 people to be around him and potentially be the same people that write tell-alls. You know how many people wrote tell-alls when they left Trump left the last presidency. And so I think that is something that he wants to make sure to mitigate this term, as opposed to his first term, is the amount of enemies and friction that he creates during his term, so that afterwards it doesn't mess up the longevity of the Republican Party's power.
Well, it's true that he has indicated in the past that he really trusts the people that he has staffing the Secret Service cohort that surrounds him. And, I mean, he also might be thinking that some of these people literally threw their bodies on top of me. Maybe I don't want that type of person who's willing to throw themselves in the line of fire to leave. And maybe he's viewing the problem as more of a systemic leadership problem and feels like, all right, well, Kim Cheadle's gone. You know, the new Secret Service director has been grilled in front of Congress. Maybe they've made reforms that make me happy. And so the sort of individual players who were on the ground that day were not necessarily to blame for the security failures. Maybe it was the people who were higher up in the administration. I mean, I'm just trying to get inside his brain. I don't know for sure, but he has talked about how his Secret Service team he really likes and really trusts them.
Right, and I think all in all, like, that moment of watching his fist go up, and it was a very powerful moment for him. So I think he's probably grateful that nothing more happened, but also knows that that moment really did, outside of the Biden terrible debate, you know, it changed the entire, I think, trajectory of the election, because people started to have empathy and understand, like, listen, this is way too far. The temperature is way too high. And I think that that is something that he probably was like, listen, people really someone actually did die. So he's like, people really put their lives on the line, tried their best, and, you know, is trying to make sense of it. I just can't imagine almost losing my life and being like, no worries. You know, that's
yeah, it's crazy.
Well, we're going to talk about this a lot more, but you won't believe what Elon Musk is claiming now. Oh gosh, we'll fill you in next.